Ukraine's intelligence service is claiming responsibility for the assassination of a top Russian general in Moscow, with the Kremlin vowing revenge for what it's branded a terrorist act. Dashcam footage captured the moment Igor Kirillov and an assistant exited an apartment building in the capital before a bomb hidden in a scooter was detonated. Residents say there was no security at the complex and people were free to go in and out.
My wife and I woke up from a loud explosion. At first, we thought it was a drone. I looked out the window. My house is right here. The windows look right here. But I didn't see anything. I only heard it.
We have a construction site here. I thought they were unloading cement or something, but the explosion was so strong that it didn't look like construction work. It was very scary.
Igor Kirillov was the chief of the Russian military's nuclear, biological and chemical protection forces. The 54-year-old was killed a day after Kyiv had charged him in absentia with the use of banned substances in the war in Ukraine. Kirillov is the most senior Russian military officer to be assassinated inside Russia by Ukraine, and the former Russian leader Dmitry Medvedev, who is now a senior security official, is vowing to avenge his death.
In any case, law enforcement agencies must find the killers in Russia, and everything must be done to destroy the paymasters in Kyiv. The paymasters are also known. This is the military political leadership of Ukraine.
Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine almost 3 years ago. Since then, Ukraine's security service claims the Kremlin has used chemical weapons more than 4,800 times under Kirillov's control. In October, Britain imposed sanctions on him and his forces for using choking agents on the front line. Russia denies the allegations. But Ukraine insists the general was a legitimate target.
I can only take my hat off to our special forces who have accomplished this important task. It's no secret that we have a fairly extensive network on the territory of the Russian Federation. The way the execution was carried out, and accordingly this murder, this punishment, only testifies to the high skill of our military personnel.
There's been no comment from Russian President Vladimir Putin on Kirillov's assassination. Moscow holds Ukraine responsible for a string of high-profile killings on Russian soil. And this latest incident brings the war to Moscow as Kyiv's troops try to defend their own territory from the Kremlin's territorial gains in Ukraine.
Ukraine is demonstrating to the Kremlin that it has the ability, it has the reach to go right into Moscow, to go after and successfully assassinate a senior Russian military figure, someone who's been very prominent in the war in Ukraine in various ways. And it's a way of saying to Moscow, two can play at this game, your people are vulnerable.
John Blaxland is a Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies at Australian National University, and he joins me now from Washington, D.C. Professor Blaxland, firstly, your reaction to this development?
Yeah, good to be with you, Gemma. So it is fascinating to see what's happened. The Ukrainians have now killed about 12 major generals or lieutenant generals all up. This is the first of its kind inside, close to the Kremlin itself, only a few kilometres away. This is going to rattle many of the senior leadership in Moscow. This is clearly about making it more difficult for the Russian forces and for the Russian regime at a time when we've got 5 weeks until inauguration. And that's, I think, a very big part of the equation when it comes to what the Ukrainians are thinking.
This is a high-profile target. What do we know of him?
Oh, well, Igor Kirillov is a quite a renowned figure. He's been prominent in misinformation, disinformation. He's made up stories about the West supporting chemical weapons production inside Ukraine. He has been the commander of the Russian radiological, chemical and biological forces, nuclear, biological and chemical. So he's been directly associated with the use of, the old chemical weapons that were used in the First World War that we banned in the Geneva Conventions in the interwar period, and that largely were excluded from use in the Second World War and largely subsequently. So this is a real reversion on the Russians side. And that's deeply unsettling. Of course, the Ukrainians have tried him in absentia because of the multiple use of these chemical weapons inside Ukraine. So there is an understandable deep resentment inside Ukraine for the ugliness of the violence that's been perpetrated on Ukraine under this man's command. So from that perspective, he is somebody who's been well and truly in the targets and the crosshairs for some time, and he's got his just desserts.
Now, this assassination was on Russian soil. As we heard a moment ago, that the security at that complex could have been a lot better, though. But what does this tell us about who could have carried it out?
This is from Ukraine under the SBU, the Domestic Security Intelligence Agency for Ukraine, which has a established network inside Russia. Remembering, of course, that many Ukrainians speak Russian quite fluently and are easily, can easily mix in the crowd without being too easy to pick out. But of course, they're special forces. They're trained to be discreet and to operate stealthily. But they're using technology that we saw, 2 decades ago come to prominence in the war in Iraq, particularly with the use of improvised explosive devices with phone detonated explosives. This time it's a bit of an innovation put on the handle of a scooter that was clearly conveniently placed out the front. And that's so it's old technology but applied in a new context at a distance from Ukraine, which largely has seen the use of drones in the past. So we've seen drones dropped over Moscow, but in fairly small numbers. And I think there's been a sense amongst some of the senior military leadership and amongst Putin's inner circle that they were relatively immune. This is going to put a cat amongst the pigeons.
What is the calculation for Ukraine here, and also what does it say about how vulnerable Putin's faithful are?
So for Ukraine, they're acutely mindful that President-elect Donald Trump will take office in 5 weeks, and that there are some calculations there's a lot of uncertainty about what that's going to mean. So there's, I think, an imperative for them to act quickly, act decisively, and do so as soon as possible. That conversely, the Russians are trying to up the ante as well, and knowing that there is a deadline approaching, at which point there will be some kind of coming to some kind of negotiation, most likely, and that means that the Ukrainians need to put the pressure on, make it more difficult for Russia, and to just make it clear to the senior leadership that the stakes are high and that it involves their personal welfare as well.